I had friends whose parents were pretty young. And I kind of envied those kids because these parents were cool, they dressed cooler, they took their kids to car races and rock concerts. You didn't have to explain to them why you absolutely had to have a skateboard for Christmas. My parents were average age, the same age as most of my friends' parents. I had other friends whose parents were old and gray already. And those parents seemed cold and grumpy all the time, and I didn't envy those kids at all. Now that I'm a little bit older, my thinking on that has switched, and I no longer envy those kids who had younger parents. Mostly because I know that when those parents die, it's not going to be long before that ominous arm comes and sweeps that next generation into the grave. Whereas those people who had really old parents are going to have a nice long time to sit around and grieve and miss their folks. But my parents were pretty much the average age, and pretty much average income, average boring jobs, but they were somewhat philosophers. My father, who was very pragmatic and economical with his speech, would occasionally utter these maxims on how the world should live. My mom, who was also very practical, had an esoteric side. For example, one time we were driving down the street, just her and I, and for no reason that I could discern, she said, "Scotty, when I die, if you ever see a twisted, old, weird tree, I want you to think of me." I furrowed my brow and said, "Okay." And I meant it, and I honored that commitment. Even today, when I see a weird, twisted old tree, I think of Mom. She hasn't passed yet. Which makes me feel a little funny sometimes that I should probably get permission from her to think about her when I see an old tree while she's still alive, because she only asked me to do it after she passed. My mom had other sayings. She had quite a few, and one of them reminds me of a saying by Teddy Roosevelt. I don't think she got it from Teddy Roosevelt, but Roosevelt had many sayings that are famous now. But the one I'm thinking of is, "Walk softly and carry a big stick," which I think means avoid trouble, go out of your way not to find conflict, but when trouble finds you, use whatever force, whatever's at your disposal to vanquish it quickly. Well, my mom's version of that ended with, "Go for the jugular." And those were very poignant moments in my life, and I remember them clearly the first time I said them. But as she gets older, these things have become stylized. They're uttered at the wrong times, and they become absurd. For example, several months ago on a Saturday morning, my family, a wife and kids, were sitting around and we were contemplating going to the circus, which we like to do. My mom happened to call, and she said, "Hi, honey, what are you kids doing today?" I said, "Oh, we're thinking about going to the circus." And she said, "Oh yeah, go for the jugular." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Are you talking you like clowns?" And she just said, "Oh, Scotty, didn't you learn anything from your poor old mother?" I guess not. I thought she meant the vein. She was apparently telling me to do a song and a dance and make people laugh. As a child, I practiced witchcraft. In fact, I practiced witchcraft from childhood into my adulthood. It was just very recently that I stopped. I wasn't part of a coven or anything. In fact, I didn't even really know that I was practicing witchcraft. See, I willed things with no plausibility, no causality, no cause and effect, no empirical evidence to it, and it was dark because it violated a very universal spiritual principle, which I pitted my will against the will of God, or the moon, or your lucky rabbit's foot, or whatever construct any particular school of thought imbues a thing with, supremacy. What did I do specifically? I worried. Yes, worry is witchcraft. But thing I found is that it was very efficacious. I worried a lot. I worried all the time, and things mostly worked out in my favor. For example, as a child, I worried about my own death starting at about age six. I was scared of it. When would it happen? Could I stop it? And as you can see, it hasn't happened yet. Well, one day, I had too many worries. I had jobs and bills and children and wives. Well, one wife. But that generates a lot of words. And it became too much. It became too much for me, and I became physically and mentally ill. I was so exhausted, it reached a crisis. And I decided I'm going to stop worrying. And so I did. I stopped. And oddly enough, most things, most of the time, still work out in my favor. I don't really worry about death anymore. Kind of ticks me off a little bit that it's going to happen, but I don't worry about it. In fact, I have more energy and more time to devote to preventing bad things and to solving problems than I did in the past. So, yes, worry is witchcraft, and I am no longer practicing. When I was a child, my neighbors had a couch. And the couch was covered in plastic, and children were not allowed on that couch. And I didn't understand that, because we had a couch, and we sat on it. And we laid on it, and we ate bowls of cereal on it. Then one day I found out the reason why this couch was so protected was because they didn't own it. They had purchased it on a layaway plan from Rent-A-Center or one of those organizations. And because they hadn't completed paying for it, they felt this sense of obligation to protect it because it was somebody else's property. And I think that was pretty much the way people thought about their financial obligations and ownership in that generation. And I'd say there's been a shift in America in our thinking towards that. For example, right now, many people are strategically and deliberately reneging on certain financial obligations. These choices that people are making are having a very direct, very visible effect on our children. I'm talking about, of course, Girl Scout cookies. Girl Scouts is a nationwide organization and is broken up kind of like Toastmasters into divisions and areas and regions, and they have a similar nomenclature for the way they divide themselves. Well, my daughter is a Brownie, my wife is the troop leader, and they belong to the biggest area, division, in Arizona with 55,000 girls. Well, they've completely changed how they're selling cookies this year. They will no longer accept pre-orders, and they will no longer accept personal checks, because last year there were over 30,000 boxes that adults pre-ordered and then refused to accept delivery for and to pay for. $4 a box, that's $120,000. A large number of personal checks bounced. So they've changed the way they're doing things, which I don't understand people's choices there, because nothing makes me happier than to sit on the couch with a box of Samoans or a box of Thin Mints and eat the whole box and follow that up with drinking a jugular of milk. Mr. Toastmaster.